Corbolic V2. This is a super safe and effective natural anabolic. Not only is this product going to help you increase protein synthesis, which basically means muscle recovery and growth, it also may inhibit myostatin, which is a protein in your body that is known to inhibit muscle growth. This is a complete natural anabolic that works through multiple different pathways, has multiple trademarked ingredients. If you are a natural athlete looking for that edge, Corbolic V2 is what you need. Get yourself some.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Pro Physique Code. It's spooky because it's Halloween. Get it? Ooh, spooky season.
Ooh, are you guys prepared for Halloween? What do you guys do for Halloween?
Of course I'm prepared. I totally forgot that it was tomorrow until about like 10 minutes ago.
The surprise. There's your other surprise. It's me, Danika, and Mr. Berluti, or Benjamin.
What's going on, y'all? Good to be back on. Benjamin, Mr. Berluti, whatever works. Though you pronounced my last name right, so that's a win.
I still got it. See, waiting tables for all those years really pays off.
Yeah.
I do nothing for Halloween.
You know, is there passing out of candy?
No, I don't do that either.
Yeah. Okay.
Because I don't have kids. I don't get to go trick-or-treating. Like, I can't go get candy. So why am I going to spend my money on other people's kids so that they can go get candy, so they can come get candy? Plus, like, I got we were just talking about dogs. I got 3 dogs, right? I got the boxer mix, I got the Great Dane, I got the Beagle. And imagine 2 of those 3 are more anxious. Every time somebody's at that front door, every time somebody dings the bell, every time somebody knocks, they're going insane. And they're all trying to get out the front door at them. So it's like, no, I turn my lights off and I just try and enjoy a nice evening of peace and quiet at the home.
Yeah. I like that. I don't remember not doing Halloween. It's been like 8 years now. But yeah, there's been so much Halloweening. There's just obnoxiously. But my husband and I went for an adult Halloween party last minute and we crushed it. And we even got nominated for best couple costume. I was like, look at us.
Oh, very nice.
Okay. It was only because he like fully committed and participated, but he was the Joker from like Suicide Squad. And he like dyed his hair. He let me put makeup on him. He was like, I don't know about this. He just always wants to be Captain America. And I was like, no, this time we're going in.
So it was last minute, but you went all out.
I know. We went all out, did it. But anyways, I say Halloween has just been, we had like a monster mash for the kids. We had a Halloween party for us. And then they have a parade, and then they have a class party, and then actual Halloween. It just continues. Like there's too many costumes. There's too many finagling. Yeah, but the girls love it and they love dressing up and they find it to be like just a fun time. We also pass out candy. So yeah, we do all of it.
I feel like if you do if you do too much stuff stops being as special. Like I remember when I was a kid, like Halloween was special because it was just Halloween.
Just Halloween.
It wasn't any of the other stuff. But Halloween was super exciting. And so you looked forward to it all month and maybe you would work on your costume and stuff. And so like, it was like this longer drawn out thing that was planned. And then in November, it was Thanksgiving. So you had to think about what you could say that wouldn't piss your family off when everybody asked you what you were thankful for. Because you can't be like, time away from you, sucker. You know, so like there's always one thing that you would look forward to and like build that anticipation. I feel like I don't know how you guys could deal with that with like so many things all the time, because I'm already like, I feel like responsible adulting is already kind of overbearing. So like to add a bunch more stuff, I would just be like, nah.
Yeah. I think the first one is always fun. Like the first time it's always fun. But then by Halloween, I've dressed them up 4 times already. And granted, we have a pretty cool costume that we're doing like as a family. So I'm excited for that. But yeah, I would love a kid's perspective if they feel like it's overdone. And also, you don't even get time to breathe, I feel nowadays. Like there's Christmas decorations that are coming out already. So I'm like, hey, simmer down. Like I'm trying to finish up October.
I'm seeing all the commercials for Christmas, stuff and all that. It's like, okay, yeah, like you said, a little too soon, right? Let's give it a little
A
bit of
little
time. Let's at
aggressive.
least get into November.
See,
Right.
we don't decorate. So we don't decorate for any holidays. So that means I don't have to have plastic bins full of different decorations at the house. I don't have to buy extra stuff. I don't gotta take the time to put it up and then take it back down. I don't gotta do none of that. My life be easy.
All about efficiency.
Efficiency, 100%. So now that we're done BSing, I guess.
Yeah.
Don't cut it out, Lexi. Leave it here. I don't think she cuts out too much of the BS. Maybe she
Probably doesn't.
would just cut out my unexpected start times. for
Your
you guys.
efficiency, though, you ended on efficiency, and I'm pretty sure that could align very well with our topic.
Which I don't even remember what it is. Just kidding. So Ben being on is intentional. It's intentional, y'all. Because we want to talk about Ben just did his first show of the year. He has another one in a week and a half.
Yeah,
Not this weekend, next weekend.
Yep.
Which is, I don't know, probably you guys will probably have heard, it will have come and passed by the time this comes out, I'm sure. But second year competing?
Yep. Yeah, second year in a
season.
row. Yep.
Competing in men's physique and OCB.
Mm-hmm.
And so we want to talk about some of the things that you felt helped you to be successful, I think, particularly in the off season, in terms of keeping your body fat percentage at a lower spot, not getting too far away to where, the dieting phase was going to be too much, too long, too out of reach. And how you manage that, I think, lifestyle wise in big part, but I think even also like psychologically and on the mental aspect side of that, because
Yeah.
I do feel like that is the big piece of the puzzle that causes people to fail on the lifestyle part and on the habit part. It's that psychological component of I'm tired of this, I'm over it, I'm burnt out, yada yada, whatever stuff comes up. There's an event, we were just talking about, there's always an event, there's always something going on. Like, so talk to us, I think, a little bit about your mindset coming out of the show or even going into the show, if that's when you were thinking about that stuff prior. And I think maybe we try and take it semi-naturally from there.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, let's do it. Yeah, so after my last show, which was last November, so just about a year ago, I had in the back of my mind that I was probably going to be competing again later this year anyway. I was kind of kicking that around in the back of my mind. So I knew, okay, well, this is going to be structured after this time so that, I still have to track my intake of food, right? So I have to be consistent with my cardio targets, my training, and everything else. Because if you let things get out of hand too much and it turns into a free for all, right? You may put on more weight than you would like, and that would make your next prep, number one, more rigorous, right? But also, it's going to take a lot more time, right? So just strictly from the X's and O's side of things, I was very diligent with my whole reverse dieting process out of that show, so I could gain some weight, but increase my caloric intake so that my maintenance was in a very good place, so I could go back to a deficit later on, which was the middle of this year, so I could compete again, right? So that was what I knew I had to do. And from the psychological aspect, it was like, okay, I know I want to do this thing, right? Now how do I have to set up my life so that I can do it, right? In terms of, how many, even going even deeper into practical things, like, okay, how's my day of eating going to look, just generally speaking, between work, life, family events, holidays, whatever, all that sort of thing. And playing that all out ahead of time and knowing, okay, I can't gain too much weight. I ended up gaining, by the time it was all said and done, just about 15 pounds above stage weight, gradually over 8 months. So that put me in a good place, right? And, I knew that, and just going back to that psychological point I started on, I knew if I was within, I like to call striking distance of being back on stage where I'm relatively lean, but I still got to lose some body fat, some weight to get back on stage. This prep is going to be, 4-ish months of the process, but it's not going to be the worst prep of all time, right? It's more be like, hey, we're going to push hard for this period of time, and then we're going to come out of it again, right? So that's how I always take it. And even like with my clients, I always go back to this. I'm like, hey, structure in, it doesn't matter what your goals are, whether it is for stepping on stage or just general fat loss, right? I mean, the principles are kind of the same, right? We have to be very structured with things. We have to take into account what we're putting into our bodies. So why not set up our days such that, hey, I want to have X number of meals per day. This allows me to eat with my family, right? Maybe I'm not going to take an extreme approach where I only eat, I don't know, once a day or something. Okay, well, how's that going to fit into my structure with my kids, my family, right? I mean, just keeping things simple and eating foods that you enjoy. That's something else that has helped me, right? Like not eating plain food, all that sort of thing has helped. So I know I'm kind of going on a side tangent here.
I
But
enjoy pizza
those
though.
are some those are some things that have helped. So just kind of like right off the bat. And just going, and also one other thing, like going through the process for the first time after that first season, like what it's gonna take, so you kind of know what you're signing up for. So a lot of the unknowns that were before, like I knew, coming into this that were gonna present themselves, right? So that's another thing that kind of made it easier, I would say, going into the second season.
Yeah, and I think so. Obviously, all of us kind of have, I don't know. I want to call it an advantage. I'm going to call it an advantage. I think each of us has an advantage because this is our livelihood as well. So it's not like I'm going to work and I'm doing IT work, or I'm in an office all day and all my livelihood is tied to that. And then on top of that, if I want to deal with my fitness goals, for me, that's extra stuff, and it's a separate thing. Like for us, it's kind of tied into it almost, right? So like if I'm way out of shape, do people trust me as much to help them with their fitness goals and to be in shape and to take care of those things? Some of them might, absolutely. But a lot of people won't because I don't look the part for them. So I do think that helps with motivation. But I think the hard part for most people is, how do we find that fine line of, I can keep track of this and be accountable to it, but not be so overwhelmed by it that it consumes me.
Absolutely.
Hashtag Danica.
I absolutely agree. I do have a few like questions about your process, Ben, but also I wanted to go from like a very beginning state. So like what even made you think I'm going to do a show? Did you have in the very beginning of like your fitness journey and everything, did you have a big weight loss that happened?
Yeah, I lost 50 pounds. So I used to compete in powerlifting as I like to say, the full bulk power lifter, right? So I went through, like, we're going back a while now, where I went through a process where in 1 year I dropped 30 pounds. And it was more at that point where I was like, okay, I was always more of like a fan of bodybuilding, the physique competition kind of thing. But I was like, hey, this is something I could do, right? Like after I dropped that initial weight, it was like, hey, if I wanted to kind of dial things in and step on stage, like I could do it. And, I've competed in powerlifting, I've done that. Well, I want to try experience something else, right? How about this side of things? Now I could kind of, do that. And when I did that first show, I knew for sure that, it's something I wanted to put all of my chips in that basket, as opposed to like the powerlifting side or something else.
How did you initially lose that big bulk of weight? And do you feel like after that process, because similar to what Stephen was saying too, but you kind of have to build, in order to do a competition, you have to build a strong foundation. I strongly believe in that. You can't just be willy-nilly about it and be like, I think even though I eat like Oreos and shit food and drink every single night, I don't lift.
Hey.
No judgment placed. But I'm just saying, probably not your best foundation to then jump into a show, right? So you were kind
Right.
of building up these skills and tools and stronger foundation. And I would assume a good internal dialogue, and you were cognizant about how your body was able to change and perform, and like what these changes were bringing. And you kept, we'll talk about the healthy mindset that
Yeah.
you, I'm assuming, are keeping. But how did you initially lose that weight? And then what tools did you apply there that you're still applying now in the competition world?
Sure. Yeah, no, I think it was a really good question. Very, very applicable too. So for me, I'm a very goal-oriented and structured person when I'm set on a goal. So what helped me, number one, to establish that base was I always enjoyed exercising and working out, right? So that was kind of like, okay, I'm already doing that. But what helped me drop the weight was I started taking an account of what I was putting into my body, right? By tracking my intake of food, right? Very just kind of practical, straightforward. And I began to realize that, hey, you're putting in a lot more into your body than you really think you really think that you do, right? So from there, I was like, okay, I'm already eating plenty of food. So it just becomes a matter of going into a calorie deficit, and structuring my macros in a way that's going to kind of optimize my physique, right? And now from there, I mentioned the point about being very structured. I had the goal, I had the plan on paper. Now I just have to execute it. And from there, I went, okay, well, I got to hit these targets. I'm going to do it 100% of the time. And no excuses, right? Like I just have to plan it out ahead of time, right? I'm not going to let the day happen to me. I'm gonna again, plan it out, then do the necessary prep work I have to do. Just very simple food prep, nothing elaborate, and I'm gonna check the boxes and make it happen. And from there, I didn't think about honestly about okay, what's going to happen in 6 months from now. It's more like okay, each week I am taking account things. I'm taking pictures. I'm doing measurements. I'm checking the scale, right? I'm seeing things trending down. Okay, now this is getting very motivating, right? Because each week there's an improvement, right? So it was more like before I knew it, like months had gone by. I'm like, wow, I just dropped 15 pounds. I didn't even notice, right? So by the
Why did you
time
want to do that in the first place?
I wanted to do a photo shoot then, and I just wanted to be leaner,
So
and
you
as simple
also
as that.
had like you kind of had a dangling little carrot goal.
Exactly. Yep. Yeah. There was that dangling little carrot there. Yep. And I was like, okay, I got this. I got this end goal date, right? It's got to be around this time. And now I just have to execute the plan. So, that is what helped me initially to answer that question. Yeah.
And then what challenges? Well, two things. Were there big changes that you had to make? Like, did you were there big changes you had to make as far as like your meal planning, the structure of your nutrition? Were there big significant changes where you had to do a big adjustment, or was it just kind of like tidying things up a little bit and structuring things a little bit more? That's one question. And then the other part is, did you feel any resistance to those changes that you had to apply in order to get the results that you were looking for? And if you didn't feel any resistance, what do you think it was that made it so the resistance wasn't there? That was a lot.
Yeah.
Can you break that
Yeah,
down?
no, that's a good question. It was more of a matter of tidying things up and going, okay, I'm probably going to be going out to eat a lot less. That's fine because my goal is more important to me at this period of time. That food's always going to be there in the future. I can partake in that, right? It's kind of a mindset shift, right? Like that's the little things that make it easier because if I went, okay, I can never go out to eat again. Well, maybe I could have went through that. But after that, that process, I probably would have, put a lot of focus on that, and maybe that would kind of throw me off of where I wanted to be, right? So it's a matter of tidying things up, and then resistance. A lot of people around me are into the exercise thing, right? So like Steven mentioned earlier, we kind of have this unfair advantage where, for us, this is what we do full time, right? So there was that benefit. And for others who didn't really understand, if they asked questions, like if I ever brought, some food with me or something, or if I was at a family event and I wasn't having the drink or the dessert or whatever, and they're wondering why, in just a well-meaning way, like, well, why you're not having that, or do you do some, some random diet thing? I'm like, no, I'm just doing this thing. I got this goal I'm working towards, explaining just very simply, not making a big deal about it.
Mhm.
And people respect that, if I'm not all high and mighty about it, right? I'm not going to have a lot of resistance. So that made things a lot smoother sailing. And then in terms of other forms of resistance, when things like energy levels dipped or hunger increased, well, I knew that was a signal that things were working. So I almost turned that on his head and went, okay, I'm gonna let that be a motivating factor for me to keep pushing and still be consistent because I know the plan's working, right? So those are kind of some practical and kind of like psychological things that kind of intertwine to help me be successful initially.
So I think one of the things that I don't want to miss is this idea that like it wasn't okay. All of a sudden, I'm gonna go hard and I'm gonna do a prep and I want to do a bodybuilding show because that's gonna be my motivation and carrot on a stick. You had already stuck your toe in the water, right? You've already tested it. You've
100%.
done powerlifting, you've been in the gym, you've been, partaking in physical activity, you've done some dieting, but you're paying attention to it, you're counting your numbers. So you've gone through like the educational stuff, and through going through those things is when it felt like, from my understanding of what I'm hearing, is that's when you're like, oh, I could do this. Like this is realistic. This is reasonable for me now. And it's almost like for a lot of us, I think we have to go through that almost proving grounds of maybe getting a little bit leaner and making a lot of those lifestyle changes before I had never had interest in getting on stage. It wasn't until I started doing those things where I was like, oh, maybe. And then Men's Physique came out, and my buddy's like, hey, you want to do a show? I was like, oh, yeah, that looks realistic to me. Like, I could probably do that. That seems reasonable. Like, I think that is an achievable goal for me. And that was how I started it. My buddy was just like, you're in better shape than me, dude. You want to do this? I was like, sure. Yeah, man. Sounds good, buddy. Let's do it. But it was because I had had the ability to build confidence and efficacy in my ability to like handle how do I control my body weight? How do I control, building muscle and being active and those kind of things? And I think that's lost because even though Danica was like, you can't do it. I know plenty of people that will go and do a 12-week prep and they'll get a meal plan that's crazy aggressive and they'll diet real hard. And then right after the show, they're blowing back up.
Right.
And then the other problem is that's how they associate prep. They associate prep with this crazy aggressive approach. I have to eat 800 calories a day and do 2 hours on the stairs every day. And that's prep. And that's what bodybuilding is. And I think when you take that other approach, you realize that's not the case,
Mhm.
which there's no way in hell I'm ever going to enjoy 800 calories and 2 hours of cardio a day. It's
Oh,
never going to
geez.
happen.
Yeah, no.
Do you think that this might be an unpopular opinion, but I feel that there has to be a detachment of emotion almost when it comes to certain things, like especially around food,
Yes.
to create a even more solid foundation.
Yes.
1000%. Because if we all see it, if I'm too emotionally invested in food, every time my emotions are out of balance or beyond what I can control well, food becomes a factor and food becomes a piece of that. And so, oh man, I really don't feel good. You know what? I'm gonna just go over to Twisty Treat. I'm gonna get twisted. It's a little ice cream place, little ice cream cone huts. Yeah, I'm just go get some ice cream. I'm gonna treat myself. I deserve it. It's been a tough day. It's been a tough week. Every
Yeah.
time. And also
Yeah.
like, how are you supposed to, 'cause let's be real, most of my diet is kind of boring. It's kind of repetitive. It's kind of the same thing most of the time. Like that's not emotionally like exciting, but that's
Yeah.
what helps me to be successful.
Right. Yeah. I was just thinking about like the things that you had mentioned, Ben, and how you were just very nonchalant about it. You're like, okay, so I don't get to go out to dinner that much. Like, okay, that doesn't mean I can't in the future. There was no emotional attachment that was so strong that it was overriding your commitment to your goals. And that, I think, I know for me personally that, fortunately and unfortunately in a way, type 1 diabetes really kind of made me view food in a less attached, like emotionally attached way. I had
Yeah,
no
that's a
choice.
really good point, actually. Yeah.
So there was no, I was like, food is fuel. Like, it tastes good. I'm like, but this food is 1 unit of insulin. This food is 1.5. Like, this
That
food,
fuel will kill me.
that fuel might be in a coma. Like, so that really helped me in a way to make sure that I had a strong foundation. That's a really twisted way to approach it, obviously,
Sure.
but that like emotional attachment, it wasn't there really. So my preps, I was like, yeah, I'll do what I can. Like, you tell me to do what I can, and I'll do it. Like, there was less emotion attached to it, and it didn't override like my drive or motivation or like intention at all. Like, I knew what I needed to do. Like you said, you checked your boxes, you did what you needed to do, and lo and behold, it worked, and it brought you to the level where you needed to be at.
Right. And that initial fat loss phase I went through really taught me all of that. And that way I was able to take some time after that to reevaluate my goals to see if I wanted to step on stage, at that point. And kind of going off of what you said, it's like the food becomes a means to get somewhere. Now, I will say that once you go through an extensive period of weight loss, or if you drop a lot of weight, right? Like, so I said, I've dropped about 50 pounds because I used to be around 185. My stage weight is 135, and that's why I weigh currently. Like, eventually, yes, you're going to start to indirectly, you will start to notice food more. Absolutely, right? But if you are intentional about not being ultra focused on it, it's going to pay dividends for you, right? So, eventually that does happen, right? So it's all about planning ahead. I talk about planning your nutrition, like planning ahead of time. Hey, I know this could happen, right? But it's like, I need to be on top of it, right? It's like, if we have a bad day in general, Stephen mentioned like, hey, I'm going to go over to Twisty Treat, right? Twisty Treat is awesome down here in Florida. But I digress. Like if you have a bad day or something, it puts you in this place where mentally you may not feel the best, right? It's like, hey, I gotta take it. It doesn't even have to be around food. It could be around anything in our life, work stressors, family stressors, other things. If I'm intentional about focusing on some mindset tasks that improve my relationship with that, like that can help. And it's going to transfer over to other areas in your life, right? And so another thing I mentioned to my clients, like, hey, when you go through this process, like, yeah, maybe we are eating some of the kind of the boring foods, right? Maybe we are eating our chicken or rice or pasta, whatever. But like, make your food taste good, right? Like, if you're just eating super plain food all the time, chances are in the long run, you're not going to kind of like stick to that plan, right? Just do some little things to make it taste good. Like, you can put seasoning on your food, it'll taste good, right? Like, little things like that
What?
help. What? Yeah, I know, right?
Yeah.
And you will be fine. And like, it makes the food actually, like, I enjoy the foods I eat during prep, right? I'm just eating less of them, right? So it's not like, oh man, I gotta eat this food. It's like, no, I never dread a meal. So that's something that also really helps with adherence in the long run. And also, just like I was saying, being on top of not becoming food focused, right? Especially when you're reversing out of a show or something, right? Just kind of knowing, okay, I must follow this plan if I want to maintain my progress. Because let's say I wanted to step on stage originally for that original fat loss phase, going down 50 pounds, that is like, I mean, hey, it could happen, right? I mean, people have done some incredible transformations, but that is a huge drop, right? So taking an approach of perhaps multiple fat loss phases and going, okay, I'm going to get halfway there. Once I get halfway there, I want to maintain my progress and be adherent to my plan. And now I'm eating some more food, which is great. That's going to bring my hunger levels down. That's also going to help reducing that focus on food, right? And then from there, you go, okay, I'm going to take some time away from that, and I could go into a deficit later if I so choose, right? And be successful. So those are the kind of some thoughts that came to mind when you were mentioning that.
So, I mean, I think it's important for people to recognize, though, that like getting to those really lean levels, your hunger signaling and food focus inherently is going to be higher.
Right.
Because your body is not producing the same hormone amounts that it normally would.
Absolutely.
And so the ones that we normally talk about are ghrelin, which is what tells you you're hungry and is excreted by your stomach. It's your tum-tum. And then leptin, which is the one that blocks that. So it's a feeling of satiety, and that's secreted by your fat cells. But it's based on the size of the fat cells. So when you get leaner, those fat cells shrink. They secrete less leptin. And so now, if you're doing those things that don't have a lot of stability or consistency, and you're like, oh, you know what? I know I'm a few weeks out from the show, but it's worth it for me on these low macros to get a piece of pizza in, or to get this in or that in. Part of the ghrelin signaling is the stretch reflex on your stomach. So when you're sticking to those more boring foods, you have larger meals typically for the amount of calories you get more volume out of that. And that helps you to not feel as hungry. It helps you to kind of not have to deal with as much food focus. Because I remember in my first prep, man, I was watching Food Network all the time. I'd be doing cardio watching the Food Network channel, like British Bake Off and all this. I don't think that was even around back then, but you know what I mean. And I was like, dude, what was I thinking? I'm literally putting all this stuff in my face that I'm quote unquote not allowed to have. It made everything so much worse. Like, so did you feel like with your consistency and with your plan that was a big thing for you? Like, were you trying to do 3 meals a day? Were you doing 6 meals a day? Like, how did you manage that?
Yeah, so it was more like 4 meals a day, 3 of which being larger, which, like you said, is going to have more of that satiating effect, right? As opposed to having more smaller meals. That's something that has helped me, even in this prep, religiously stuck to 4 meals. Again, 3 of which being larger, good amount of protein at each. So that way, it's like, okay, yeah, I could have a piece of pizza I guess if I wanted to, right? I could have, okay, here's a good example. I could have 2 Pop-Tarts, right? All right, that's like 70 carb, what, 9, 10 fat? I
Okay,
would much
Paul.
rather have a lot more rice or a lot more wheat pasta or a lot more oats at breakfast and be full and not be just like craving, more of the Pop-Tarts, right? Or more of the pizza or whatever. Because like you said, your body is going to be wanting to crave those things. So if you keep it simple, and I don't just eat okay, I give the example of the oats. I don't just eat the oats plain, right? Like make it taste good a little bit, right? Like I know, hey, I'll put 10 grams of sugar-free maple syrup in there, right? Like I'll weigh it out and put it in. And now it tastes kind of good, helps me stick to the plan, and it's just a moderate amount. It's not like I'm putting a whole bottle on, right? And run into issues there. So I mean, like, that is something that's definitely helped me, kind of taking a moderate approach.
Yeah, that was my next question. It's like every prep for me, I've had a thing. Like it was a thing that wasn't like a quote unquote healthy food, but it was something that like satiated my sweet tooth and like helped me to kind of not feel like I was so limited and stuff. And so like the last one, it was like those little Dove chocolate squares, because you can pretty much anybody can fit like 2 or 4 of those in. Like, did you have one of those things that was like it for you, that like it scratched the itch enough, essentially, in terms of like the hunger stuff or the food focused stuff?
Honestly, I will tell you, I know it's not a popular opinion, but it would be the sugar-free condiments and just weighing it out. Like I would literally put 10 grams of sugar-free barbecue on my lunch every single day. So now I'm having barbecue chicken every day. I'll put 10 grams of sugar-free teriyaki on my chicken and rice at dinner, right? Like it took care of that just enough. I'll have, instead of just putting protein powder in my shaker cup and chugging it, and that fills me up for 3 seconds, I'll mix some frozen fruit with the protein powder, some ice, and now it's like a protein ice cream or something, right? Like something like that. Little things like that help. It's not going to mess up my digestion either. and I can still make that progress. And if I do that consistently, like my body's used to having that, so I'm processing it well. And that's what's helped me, big time there.
Caveat on that. For you, it didn't mess up your digestion.
Right.
That's not going to be for
Right.
everybody.
Yeah.
So for those of you out there, you're like, oh, sugar-free things. And then, because I have a name for Walden Farms for what it does to me. And it's essentially bathroom a-go-go,
Mm.
So like for me, I can't use those things. It tears me up. So for you guys out there listening, there's nothing wrong with them as long as you're still feeling good with them. So if it works for Ben, doesn't necessarily mean it works for you. I can't use those things myself because they wreck me inside my tum-tum.
Yeah, 100%. And the dosage is the poison too, right? Like if
Mm-hmm.
I put the whole bottle on there, I probably would probably wouldn't be good, right? So that's
sure.
definitely worth noting.
Yeah. I wanted to go back really quick because I don't want to sound like a cold-hearted, non-emotional person when it comes to food. But food will elicit emotion, and that's an okay thing too. It's when it is an overabundance of emotion that brings on habits that don't serve you well or align well with the goals that you have. So there should be like, oh, it's so nice to go, I don't know, an example would be going to grandma's and grandma makes a specific pecan pie and like
Right.
it's nostalgic and it warms me and it tastes good. And that's fantastic that it brings all that emotion. It's when it kind of is at a heightened state that it's derailing you, or it's becoming a pattern or habit that like is unhealthy or completely unaligned with like what you have going on for your fitness goals. I just wanted to go back and say that real quick.
Or even like life
definitely.
goals. Because it doesn't have to just be a fitness thing, right?
Oh, just
Like-
overall health, right? And wellness.
Yeah.
And like
I'm sure there's plenty of people out there that are like, okay, well, cool. My doctor says I need to lose 150 pounds. At that point, it's not even a fitness goal. It is a life and a health goal.
Right.
At that point. So like, for sure.
And I do think it's important. I think that it's really great for all of us to, whether you're doing a competition, whether you're just in a fat loss phase, whether you're just trying to improve your physical fitness in whatever way it is, to scan yourself and to say, like, do I have any emotional kind of attachments to food? Do I find myself when I am, well, not even food, it doesn't have to be food. It can be a particular drug of choice, whatever you have, that you feel
Hell
that
yeah, brother.
you go towards to help you detach from your stressors or to help you ease up a little bit. And when you reflect on that, does it really serve you well? Like, are you able to say like, meh, I can maybe work on this habit a little bit more? I think prep allows you to kind of maybe expose some things a little bit. And hopefully with better guidance, you're able to be like, ooh, this came up. Like I just light that up and I could probably really work on this a little bit so that it doesn't become bigger and bigger and bigger, right? Or you try to just ignore it or stuff it down or say like, that must have just been a prep thing. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, it does make sense. And it's like kind of what you went back to earlier. Like if you have a general life goal, health goal, right, where you're like, hey, I don't want to be having, the pecan pie every single weekend or whatever, so that I, throws me off of my long-term, just kind of overall health goals, right? Like, let's say we have a day where, okay, we meant to have one piece and we snacked ourselves outside of that. We went outside our targets. You could learn from that, right? Like, because nobody's perfect. We take time to reflect and go, okay, why did I do that? Oh, I was kind of frustrated about something at work. It was building up all week. It was Friday night, and after Monday through Friday of dealing with that, I just did that. It was like a comfort thing, right? If you reflect on it later, go, how did that serve me? How did I feel after? It's like, yeah, maybe that didn't fix that thing I was dealing with. So maybe we could learn from that. Right, like that's somewhere else I go and often like to talk to my clients about, because it's like, hey, how is this helping us, right? And just kind of reflect on that, and then when you put it in that light, it becomes a lot easier to go, okay, I'm going to have just one piece of the pie, right? And I can enjoy the social time with family or whatever, and we'll be fine, right? And one other thing is, you know, a lot of my family's birthdays and that sort of thing are early in the year. So like I would prefer not to do prep during that time. I would, and that's what I've done with both of my preps, where I started them in the early summer and fall. And it's much easier for me to do that because there's a lot of less family activities and that sort of thing. So there's less of a barrier to entry there. It just kind of made my life a little bit easier. And I had to plan it out ahead of time and put the thought into it. But you know, that way it made it like easier to adhere to in the long run, you know. So like those little things really help. And going through either a rigorous fat loss phase or a prep, it makes you very structured with things in a way that's good, and it really benefits your everyday life. It doesn't have to be anything fitness related. You just become structured with things, right? And I think that's a wonderful like side effect, you know, of the whole process.
Yeah. It also probably allows you to view because I know that food can become like a release for people or a way to kind of escape things. But when you don't have that option during a prep, you have to tap into other things. And like you have to be able to be like, oh wow, like I actually like life still happened around you, Ben, right? Like you still have
Right.
work, you still have relationships, like you still have things that are happening. So now you're able to kind of be like, oh, I can actually resolve these conflicts or these little fires that might come up with, not that saying like you did it in the past with food, but for those who have done that, you can acknowledge and give yourself credit for being able to not have to rely on like the food as like this
100%.
supports me. You actually can see that you have other skills.
So I think this is where I wanted to reverse to real quick is when you go through the process prior, it forces you to kind of do what you were talking about in terms of that introspection and saying, okay, what am I doing? How am I dealing with things? What is setting me up for success? What is keeping me from success with my goals? And I think that that's one of the things that should set people apart in terms of, am I ready for prep? Am I not ready for prep? Is what some of those answers are. Because you can have some of those things that maybe aren't the greatest and probably still have a successful prep and do well. But there are some that like, if as soon as the S hits the F, you know, as soon as the poop hits the fan, if it's, I'm going out to eat, I'm rocking out a couple dub chubs at McDonald's, whatever, you know, like that's what we used to call them back when they were on the dollar menu, dog. It's like a $5 menu. All right. Anyways, like that's going to be something that's going to bite you in the butt because that prep is a very, very far end of the extreme scale for, you know, the dieting, the food, the fitness, all that kind of stuff. It's not a moderate thing. So you have to be able to be honest with yourself and, all right, am I going to be able to do the things necessary and that it's going to take for that? And that's why I think having like a successful fat loss phase prior, a successful maintenance phase prior are so beneficial for people. And they don't recognize like how much that's going to benefit them to if the stage is what they want to do.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And then,
Absolutely.
yeah. And then the other thing is the coping mechanisms.
Right.
You have to have coping mechanisms in place that are beneficial and healthy, right?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, if you're like me, I don't necessarily feel the most emotions about most things, right? I'm not super emotionally involved in a ton of stuff. So a lot of things don't bother me. My coping mechanisms, I can probably get away with less of them or different ones than maybe, I feel like Danika, you are a very feelings-based person. Like you feel a lot of feelings. If not you, my wife most certainly feels every single feeling. And so her coping mechanisms and how she has to deal with that stuff has to be different. It
Yeah.
still comes back to knowing who you are, knowing your personality type, where you're at in life, and being able to manage those things in a way that benefits you overall and the goal. Because the last thing you want to do is put yourself into that spot of prepping, and then it ends up being a negative, or you end up in a worse place after the fact.
Yeah. I feel like I would ask this if I was listening. So what if you are a feelings person? And then what are other coping mechanisms or tools that you use? aside from like food or alcohol or you name, again, your drug of choice. But being able to, so I have my clients do like a 5-minute rule. And sometimes I'll say like, you have 2 containers of a popsicle stick, and the popsicle stick you can grab, you can be in the feeling, but you give yourself 5 minutes. And that's the duration of time that you're allowed to stay in that feeling, because staying in it for a longer period of time doesn't do you any good unless you're actually being productive in that emotion, which 9 times out of 10, if it's a heightened emotion, you're not. So being able to give yourself 5 minutes, you let it all out, you process it, and then you got to drop it in the other thing. Like you are done. And the duration of time that you stay in a negative emotion is most important. So that has been very useful for the people who are like, but I feel all the feelings. So I'm like, yeah, girl, like and some men, but most of the time I will say it's females. But if you are that type of person where you feel all the things, allow yourself, don't be like, well, I'm just stupid and like I'm never going to be successful because I feel all the feels. No, just don't stay in the negative feels for an extended period of time that you literally lose sight of every other thing that you're doing in the world. So it's the duration of time that you stay in there. So that's kind of a tool that I use where I give it space, I acknowledge, and then I let it go.
So we always call that the Chardonnay moment. You get your Chardonnay moment. You get 24
Yes.
hours to bitch, to complain, to moan, to feel anything you want to feel. And once that's done, back to work.
Yes.
Like let's go be productive. Like let's go
Yeah.
do things that we want to do in life.
Yeah.
I don't think anybody wants to be in those feels anyways. Like
No.
Right.
I think a lot of people just they have a hard time getting out of them and giving them up. Like or
Exactly.
recognizing that they're not benefiting them.
Yeah, and they actually expend way more energy than other feelings. They expend more energy, but when you are having a positive feeling, you actually get more energy. So I try to tell my clients, like, yeah, no wonder why you're lethargic, drained, and cannot execute a proper thought right now. You've been staying in anger for like 5 days. Like, we need to get out of here because your brain cells are like, I'm done. I'm out. Like, I can't do any of this.
There's other emotions other than anger.
Anger, happy. Ben, I wanted to ask too, from like a male perspective, going through that huge fat loss and then now into preps, how are you with body image? How are you with how you view yourself? And then the process of like gaining that weight, what has helped you to kind of stay in a good internal dialogue and to understand like this is my prep phase, like this is a cut phase, this is a build phase. How are you with that?
Yeah, no, that's a really important consideration because it's very real because like after like post show, you have to put some body fat back on, right? And any competitor would lie if they said, over a period of several months, you put a little bit of body fat back on and hey, it kind of sucks at first, right? Like you gotta acknowledge, oh man, it kind of stinks. But it's like I'm in a very controlled increase of calories here. I need to put on some body weight, some body fat now, so that I can do this later, so I can have the opportunity to do this, right? So what has helped me is that I've gone, okay, if I want to do this again, if I want to improve, I need to put on some weight. The judge would say, hey, you probably need a little bit more size overall. Okay, well, I can't stay stage lean all the time, right? So I know that if I'm very controlled with things and I put on some weight, it's not that big of a deal, right? And now I didn't just, willy-nilly go, oh, okay, well, I'm going through the process. Hopefully this is going to be okay. No, I had to think about ahead of time because that definitely could present itself. But as long as I'm intentional about going, okay, I know this needs to happen. I know I'm going to be staying relatively lean anyway, right? Like, I've heard Lexi talk about this where she's like, with some clients who are like, kind of struggle with this because it's real. Like, hey, you are goals to a lot of people, right? Like, if you add, 15 pounds or whatever post show, like, we're still at a place where a lot of folks are like, family, whatever, like, man, I want to look like you. And you're like, wow, I'm still above my stage weight. I'm not as lean as I was. You're the only one that knows that, right? So like those little kind of like mindset like shifts have definitely helped me from that side of things, because that, Danica, definitely is very real, right?
Yeah.
So, and like I said, if I do the work to put on the weight, bring my calories up, bring the cardio down, it's going to allow me to have the opportunity to do this again, right? Because if I don't, if my calories are super low, my cardio is super high, I'm, you know, kind of in this like range of like halfway in prep, halfway not. Like, how am I going to go into a prep later and do well, right? So yeah, that's definitely something that's helped me.
I like to think of it as even beyond that. Like being that lean, obviously is not good for health, right? It's definitely not good for building. So if we go back to the science, your fat cells secrete leptin. Well, your brain secretes sex hormones based on, like, if you have lower leptin levels, that can make an impact on those, right? There's some studies out there that have shown that lower circulating leptin levels end up with lower sex hormones for people. And for men, we most certainly know testosterone drops when you're lean, period. I like to think of it as I'm excited for off season because that's when I feel my best. I'm excited for having a little bit more body fat because that's when I feel my best. But I was not always like that. And that was not always the case for me because many, many, many years of my bodybuilding journey, I would be in agreement with you, be like, yeah, putting on more body fat sucks. And I don't think it was until I had, and don't take this the wrong way, and I don't want anybody to misinterpret this because it's not a negative thing, but it took me a long time and a lot of experience before that made more importance to me than being lean. Because I think when you're in the bodybuilding, what are you doing? You're immersed in it. You're always looking at other people that are lean and on stage. And so it becomes almost this
It's just
mindset.
aesthetically driven.
Right.
Yeah.
But if we objectively look at it and say, man, well, did I feel better 6 months ago? Like before I started prep? You're like, oh yeah, I was stronger. I was putting more weight. I had more energy. I didn't maybe get lightheaded.
Great
I wasn't,
point. Yeah.
yeah. Then you're like, oh, well, I'm excited to feel that way again, right? I'm excited to be able to have more energy for, my family and the people around me and my friends. And, I'm excited to be able to not have to be as diligent in planning to go out with them and do something and maybe have a little bit more of that. So I do think it's important because yes, it's cool to be lean. I think bodybuilding is cool and it provides a ton of things, but it's also cool to be like in a place that's just normal. And I do think that for a lot of people, there is this easy misconception to mistake what is normal and healthy when we're perpetually in the bodybuilding stuff and in those physique sports. And I do think that is a really important delineation for people to understand.
Yeah. I would even say nowadays, I think that it's even more difficult to be like, I'll give myself as an example. So I'm like 15, 16 pounds above stage weight, which is healthy. Like that is healthy, right? This is my healthy body. And you can still see my definition. And that is healthy. That's like nowadays, unfortunately, I feel that healthy is viewed differently. Does that make sense? Like,
Healthy, there is healthy, and then there is what people are marketing to you to be healthy.
yeah.
Definitely.
And that really, so like, I have had people be like, are you prepping for a show? I'm like, no, I'm living life right now. Like, this is healthy, active, fit. Like, this is fit. And fit is okay. Like, fit is healthy. And what is marketed is like this, like bigger. I'm probably gonna get so much lashback with this, but that's fine.
Good, say it,
Ah,
yes.
oh,
Getting
there's just
controversial
this,
here.
very controversial. There's this marketing. So the reason why I mentioned this is because I got my nails done the other day and I was watching The Price is Right.
Ooh,
So,
Drew Carey? Come on,
so
man.
old.
Ohio.
No,
Oh,
older.
Bob Barker. So reruns. Okay.
Yes. The audience, everyone's like running down, like bebopping around, like, and a good frame to their body, right? Like everyone was relatively looked fit, healthy, active. Now, I think that that's not as prevalent. So
The data would agree.
the data would agree. So it's interesting to be like, to find out where your healthy is when there's like extremes now, and then like people who kind of fit. Like, I just feel that nowadays it's very distorted. And to be in the fitness world, like the bodybuilding world, like you should be able to understand that like extreme leanness is, you also have to look at your health markers. You also, like you said, look at other variables outside of what you are looking like, because I don't think that you can tag like, well, this looks healthy. Like, so this must be healthy. I don't think you can do that as much now.
Yeah, and I think the disservice that it does to people with that mindset, and maybe you're in the industry, you don't have that mindset, it doesn't affect you. Hell yeah, that's
Right.
awesome. But I think for a lot of people, they get to a good, healthy place where they feel good. Their health markers are good. Their doctors are happy. Like they have energy. Like things are just solid. And for some people, maybe that's a little bit more body fat. For some people, maybe that's a little bit less body fat. Everyone's different, right? So like me, I'm probably always going to be a linear individual. I have a hard time putting on weight. Everybody's like, F you. I'm like, I know, until, you wanted to be a bodybuilder. And now that's the biggest issue, right? But understanding that, like, finding that happy place where you feel good and your health is in a good spot, we're not having a bunch of extra conditions come up that the doctor's having to, medicate and put extra stuff on that are, things that we can control. Like, that's friggin' beautiful. And just because, we put out all these influencers and this stuff in your face of when somebody's really lean, just because you don't look like that, that's like, it's okay. Like, you can't let that take away your pride, your fulfillment, and your joy in where you're at either. And I think,
100%.
like, that's a hard part post show.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that you brought up, Steven, the part about how everything improves as you put on some weight. Your overall sense of well-being improves, which is gonna positively impact every single thing in your life, right? So that's a huge thing. That is definitely a benefit that you can't lose sight of, right? After a show.
And maybe those are things that you write down, right? Like, you write them down for yourself of, oh man, like I don't have as much energy to do this, or my libido is shot and like that doesn't feel that good, or I can't function, like I feel as though I always have brain fog, or
My hair's all falling out.
my hair is falling out, I don't have my cycle, like I'm always cold, whatever that may be, right? Maybe you write that shit down and then you start to realize like, I really actually like those things. Like those things are really good for me. Let's try to get those things back, right? And in order to get those things back, I have to be at a healthy weight. And that is very specific for each individual, like Steven said, but reminding yourself that those markers, those little tabs that you want to open back up are really, really important and way better than the striations that you might see on your ass.
Right. Yeah, and
We
the
call
other
that
thing
La Gross
is,
Spot.
yeah. And the other thing is, like, if you don't turn post show or post fat loss phase into a free for all where you're eating out 47 times a week, if you know you're going to be very structured with things, you're going to reach that healthy weight, and be good to go, right? Because you have a plan for yourself. And again, you start to feel better, right? And if you could work in some flexibility, let's say someone has a birthday in their family, you could work that in. During prep, you probably couldn't have the birthday cake, but now you can, right? I'm just not having the whole thing, right? Like, it's just about making that balance and knowing that you will be in a good place. Again, if you are just diligent with things, on top of things, and intentional.
Yeah.
That's
I
so
think people
important.
forget the point post show. It's not to not gain body fat. It's just to control it. It's to control how much you're doing and then get you back to a place where you are healthy and maintaining well. And so thinking about that prior, having a plan for that prior, like understanding that before you get to the end can be super beneficial and helpful because, like you said, you're kind of planning everything out ahead of time. you're preparing yourself mentally and physically ahead of time to deal with those things. And if you don't, then getting through with that, being so immersed in it, and then having to put on body weight and deal with the post-show stuff of not having the next goal necessarily per se, because maybe we do need to take time off to build, and maybe a year's not going to do it. So maybe we need to take 2, 3. Shoot, I take 4 years off at this point in between my shows. You know, like maybe if you're not mentally prepared for that going into that, understanding it, like those things can be hard to deal with.
Yeah. Ben, do you have any fear that ever comes up where you are fearful of going back to where you started? Of like the 50,
No,
50
yeah, no, that's a really good question. And no, just because I've developed the habits through just incorporating the principles I have learned into my daily life, where it just went in my mind, because I know I've kind of, I don't know, nobody's perfect, but I put the pieces together where I can structure my lifestyle such that I'm not going to go back to where I started, right? I mean, it's just
Yeah.
as simple as that, right? Just
Yeah.
because I didn't take an extreme approach to any of this, and that's what's made it sustainable for me.
Yeah, that's such an important point. There's a lot of individuals that I work with where they have a fear of going back to where they started. And I'll say, well, what are you doing now? Like the only thing that would make you go back to where you started is if you were engaging in those patterns prior to, and you've developed a whole bunch of new ones. So like, are you about to change up on me anytime soon? Like
Right.
probably not. So like trust in yourself that what you're doing is conducive to maintain this and to continue progressing and not to fall back. It doesn't just like you think the thought and it happens. It's not like that. And you're not going to become a whole different person tomorrow. You've instilled so much greatness right now.
Right.
Keep going and believe in yourself that you're going to uphold that progress that you're making.
Yeah, and you've developed new habits through that phase where you've
Right.
made this incredible transformation or whatever. So it's like now we're gonna have to unlearn habits. Like that's gonna be kind of hard to do, right?
Right.
Like because we developed some positive habits here, and those are things you could build off of for sure.
Do you guys think that has to do with comfort level? Like, and ties it back again, doing a dieting phase and reverse phase successfully before going into the idea of competition. Like you had enough time to get comfortable in these things, right? Because if somebody's not comfortable in the lifestyle habits or the things, I'm worried about them going back because they haven't truly accepted it and embraced it enough to where it feels natural, right? It feels like just the thing. So do you think that like that feeling of, or the possibility of being worried about going back to it, did it kind of like fade over time as you became more comfortable just in the day to day? Like in doing these things on a regular basis, it kind of became more of just, that's just what I do. It's who I am.
Your norm. Like it just became your norm. Yeah. As opposed to constantly trying to fit in that habit and like make it work and make it fit, make it be a part of you. Yeah, you have to let go. I would totally agree. You have to be able to let go of parts that aren't working and like fill that void with some new stuff that's working really well. And then you got to consistently do it over time to make it a habit. That's just now your norm.
I think of
Yeah,
it like smoking almost. I was talking to somebody the other day and they were talking. So most people don't know, I used to smoke a pack a day. And I probably smoked until, I don't know, from when I was like 13 or 14 to when I was like, I don't know, 20, maybe 21. Then I quit cold turkey. But there's this weird thing that my brain does. If I see somebody smoking on TV, I inhale at the same time they inhale. And I notice it. I'm like, what's wrong with you, man? It's been what, over 15 years. Still happens sometimes. And so like there's always that kind of in the back of your head to some degree, like, oh, I could go back to doing that. Like, oh, I could go back to just playing computer games. Yeah, that was fine. I enjoyed that when I did it. There's nothing wrong with that. But it definitely doesn't serve me now. Like that's what I think of. And I'm like, I understand that on that aspect of like, oh yeah, I could end up right back where I was. I just have to stay consistent in the here and now in the present and not get caught up in the past. So like even I feel like a lot of people think that once you bypass it, you're done, and you're not dealing with it anymore. But I feel like a lot of these things, they're consistent or even sometimes semi-consistent of like, you're still going to have maybe some of those same inclinations. You just have to remember why you gave those things up.
Yeah, I think, well, you probably are, you're just bringing your conscious mind more on board. Like you're like, ooh, that's interesting. Oh, okay. Like you're actually thinking about it. It's not just a smooth sail to do anymore, because that path is not as just open wide field. It's very overgrown by like the work that you've done, right? So it's not easily accessible. So you have to have a thought prior to. And I think that's what does happen to kind of help us disrupt those patterns. You overgrow it so much so it's still there. You could still access it. You're probably going to have to do a little bit more work though to access it.
That's a really good way of putting it. And you don't want to be in a place where you're always trying to, as you go through the whole process of trying to like hold off regression and falling back into the old part, right? Because that way we have to go, okay, have I fully established these new habits through the principles I'm implementing day to day? And that's going to more kind of take root the longer you do it, right? And I'll put you in a better place to be successful, in the long run, right? But yeah, I think that's a really important thing, because like you said, Stephen, like you could be reminded of that. And you're like, it's been 15 years, right? But like those little, it kind of pops in your mind, but it's like, well, no, right? Because I've, like you were saying, Danica, like that trail in the past, whatever, it's getting overgrown, right? So it's like things have changed a lot, right? But so yeah, that's definitely something that's worth mentioning for sure.
Yeah, you also build a lot more around that like cue. There's more thoughts, there's more different emotion that's attached to it. It's just different. Like I would even say, so in probably like high school, yeah, definitely probably in
Yes.
high
High
school.
school
Oh,
problems. Let's go, dog.
high school
Yeah.
problems. I definitely struggled with restrictive eating, and I knew what I was doing, but it was easily accessible. Like, and there was no other thought attached to it. It was like, this is what I do. Like, there was no other thought. And that was easy for me to do. If it were to ever come up now, the other thoughts are like, oh my gosh, you would lose your muscle. Why would you ever do that? That's ridiculous. Like, there are so many other attached thoughts and tools and emotions. Like, the emotion is no longer, before the emotion was like, fuck yeah, like let's do
It
it.
like blinded you to all the other stuff.
Exactly. Like now it's like, ugh, like it's kind of a disgust that I would feel. And there's other like disappointment, like you're better than that. What are you doing? Like there's so many other things that are attached to that, which is like the overgrowth, right? I would have to weed whack so hard in order for me to just naturally fall back into that habit. It's just not easily accessible. So to your point though, it takes work. Like it takes work to like have that stuff overgrow and build up the new thought patterns and build up the habits and the tools and the different emotions. Like, but then you just can't access it as easily. It won't happen like that. So
Yeah.
people should know they do the work and they build the tools and they build the habits, it's pretty cool what they can accomplish. And they don't have to have as big a fear that they're just going to slide. Like they'd have to do work to slide back in that way.
It's not like
Right.
the guy rolling the boulder up the hill for eternity. I don't know what his name is. I can't remember.
Well, I don't know his name either, but I know what you're talking about.
Yeah. Did this podcast go the way either of you thought it was going to go when you first heard?
I mean, I feel like we took a couple big turns, but I love it. It's
Yeah.
all related.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that we talk a lot about the psychological aspect of things, right? Because it's a very real consideration, because it's not all, like you see on social media and stuff, right? So it's very important to kind of dive into these things as opposed to just the practical X's and O's types of things. So I love that I went this direction, and I think everyone listening is going to get a lot of benefit from this too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Yes. Love it. All right. Well, I think we're about at an hour, right?
we are.
You
Yeah.
guys tired of us out there in radio
Yeah, right?
land? Time
Ben, is
reading.
there any other thing that you would say to like people who are wanting to dabble in competing? Any like big, I mean, you gave a bunch of tips and you gave a bunch of strategies too, but anything that's been very consistently in your mind that has helped you to continue to perform?
Yeah, I would say the biggest thing is, know what you're signing up for. The second thing would be know that you are given the opportunity to starve, if you will. Okay, restrict yourself, right? Like we're not forced to do this, right? So we're very, I'm very blessed for that, right? Like I could do this just for fun. And I would say the last thing would be to just plan things out. Be intentional about structuring your days. You're gonna have to with your food. You're gonna have to with your training, with your cardio, and that structure that you're putting in by being intentional is going to benefit your everyday life, right? So after the process is all over, let's say you compete once, you never do it again. Great. Hey, you can really benefit from all the things that the positive benefits that prep induces. And again, the structure of your days is a huge one, right? So that is something that's really helped me, and just in a nutshell, what I would want to put out there for anyone thinking about competing. And the other thing is like, hey, make sure you're in a spot where you can go into a prep, right? Like if we're doing 2 hours of cardio a day, not eating a lot of food, and like, I want to do prep. Hey, we're not in a good place to do that, right? Like focus on your health, make sure you're in a good spot, and then you absolutely can do it, right? Anyone can do it.
Do you have one, Danica?
Yeah, make sure your foundation, like the foundation that your house is on is pretty solid from like physical, mental, emotional, and also social, like the support around you and the coach that you have by your side. If you do choose to have a coach, just make sure that there aren't any loose bricks. And if there are loose bricks, that you pay attention to them.
Definitely.
Right. So mine is do not give up who you are for it.
Mm.
It's a very it's a lot, right? It's not an easy thing. It takes a lot. So whatever whoever you are, whatever your identity is before you get on a bodybuilding stage, you're still that person throughout that journey and after the fact, right? You're still a daughter or a son or a mother or a father or a friend or a student or whatever it is. Like you're still those things. You do not have to give that stuff up to also get on stage and compete.
Yeah, I love that. That goes along with don't fuck up your foundation.
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
right? Like
100%.
if it's strong, then keep it strong and don't like mess it up. But I absolutely love that, Stephen. Like that should be like always something that you are reminding of. Like, who am I? Who am I?
For the guys, keep the main thing the main thing. You know?
Yeah.
So
I love
cool.
it.
All right. Well, thank you guys so much for listening. We appreciate you. Hit like, hit subscribe, watch us on YouTube. And we will talk to you soon.
Bye, guys.
All right. See y'all.